Welcome back, Spartan Nation, to episode 2 of the Spartan Hoops podcast. I'm your host, David Klein, joined today by my partner and co-owner of Spartan Hoops, Daniel Hodgman, or as he's better known on Twitter, Soldier. Dan, how are you doing?
David, I'm doing well. April went by in a flash. We're almost at May. I can't complain. Hopefully the weather holds up and we don't get snow again. How are you?
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to a little golf weather here, so hopefully that kicks off soon and we can go from there. So today, Dan and I are going to dive into MSU basketball recruiting. We've been releasing some film all this week from the incoming 2021 class. If you haven't seen it, please check it out on our YouTube channel. You can do so by searching Spartan Hoops. Also where this is found, obviously. Please drop the subscribe when you get there. We released an article on the 21 class, which will be dropping Friday when this episode drops as well. We've kind of highlighting the season in review for all three players, included some of the film, and then gave an overview of reasonable expectations for year one for this class. You can find that on SpartanHoops.com. But before we dive into the 21 class and touch on the return and the recruiting that has begun to heat up for the class of 22, I wanted to briefly touch on an offer that was extended yesterday to class of 2023 combo guard Braelon Green from Ypsi Lincoln. Emoni Bates' former teammate. He also plays for a younger age group of AAU Bates fundamental program. Dan and I both have just briefly sent out some Twitter film on him, but from what we've seen, 6'3", explosive downhill scorer, really athletic around the rim. We're going to dive in a little bit more into what he is, but he stated in an article recently on 24/7 that he believes he's a point guard who can score. I think maybe he projects a little bit more as a 2 in college, but the ability to play either the 1 or the 2. Obviously, Michigan State looking at some versatile players recently, particularly again in this 21 class. So a guy to keep an eye on. I think that they got in early, which I like about that, because I think he's going to blow up. The way that he was finishing at the rim and some of what we've seen, I think that his summer is going to explode and into kind of next year. So I like that Michigan State's kind of getting their arms around him early, because I think he's a guy that, they can really press on and maybe get. So to my understanding, there's only a couple of kids in the 2023 class that look like high major players in the state of Michigan. Curtis Williams Jr. is one. There's another player, I think it's Okafi. I'm probably butchering his name, but there's only a couple. So Michigan State's always kind of made their bread and butter with recruiting inside the state. They want to continue doing so, and so I like getting this offer out early. We're going to try to bring you some breakdowns on both Green and Williams kind of during the course of this summer, during the AAU evaluation period, and go from there. Pivoting to the incoming class for the freshmen for 2021, I'm personally some excited for this incoming class as basically any we've had. I know some of the late 90s and early 2000s, there's a boom of NBA talent. Obviously, 2016 is one that kind of stands out with Winston, Langford, Bridges, and Ward. But in terms of NBA upside and immediate college impact, I like this class basically as much as any of a trio of guards that he's ever recruited. So I wanted to kind of just first pose this question to you, Dan. Which of the three are you most excited to see in the green and white next year, and why?
Hard question, but I think at this point it's Jaden Akins. For me, I look at Jaden Akins as a point guard and incoming recruit that I don't think Izzo's ever kind of recruited this type of or had this prototype type of player. I mean, Jaden Akins is dynamic, ultra athletic. He is not just I think 3-level scorer on offense, explosive, handles the ball on a string, and is a playmaker, but defensively he comes in with some chops. I mean, we've seen this year, especially at the Geico Nationals, his defense is above average. Is something that he is going to be able to utilize coming in right away. He's kind of reminds me of that Ja Morant type. He's left-handed. I look at him, he's a prototype I've just not seen at Michigan State before. So really excited to see how he fits in the program. I think he's going to be great. And I think he's the type of player that you want to fast track as quickly as possible, because ideally you're looking at maybe his junior year, where he has a year where after that he's considering, the NBA or professional level. So can't shout it loud enough. Excited to see him come in to MSU the most.
I like that pick. Obviously, I've been high on him from the very get-go. Had the chance to get to see him live his junior year before Michigan State offered him, and I came away with the feeling that he has the potential to be a really special player for Michigan State. Like you said, I'm not quite sure that Izzo has had that kind of prototype. 6'3" lefty, extremely shifty, great first step, the ability to put the ball on the deck and score at all three levels. I think he needs to continue to gain some strength to his body. I think that's one aspect that they will work on this summer. But in terms of basketball skill set, I think you got to really like what he brings to the table. If there's one guy with the transfers heading out that maybe has a greater opportunity to play with Lawyer and Watts on their way out, I think it would be Akins, because he was going to be jammed up a little bit at that guard spot. I think that he showed you at Sunrise Christian, which was ranked second overall in the country, one of the best preparatory schools in the country. They finished just runner-up to the Geico Nationals, which is the premier high school event in across the entire country. And he really was a catalyst to helping with that. He had to take on a little bit of a different role for this team when he played at Farmington, where he was originally, and then at Ypsi Prep for his brief stint that he was there. He was more of a primary ball handler. He had the ball in his hands quite a bit. He's the guy creating for everybody. And in this situation, he came into a roster that was set already. They had the #1 point guard in the country in Kennedy Chandler, who's heading to Tennessee. And so his role was a little bit different because he came in late to the program. So he played off the bench. He was a crunch time minute guy, so he was playing when it mattered. But he really had to adapt his game by playing a little bit more off ball. And I think that he made strides in that department. And what you're really excited about is with the addition of Tyson Walker, he's a guy that now can play beside Tyson Walker because of what he's shown. I think that he has as much upside on the defensive end as any of the guards that we have. I truly believe that he is capable of maybe being the best guard defender on the roster. That, Tyson Walker won Colonial Defensive Player of the Year, but he's 6 feet, 160 pounds. He's a little bit slighter, where Akins is 6'3", longer wingspan, laterally pretty quick. And I think that what you see from what he's capable of bringing is not only the defensive end, not only the offensive end, where he showed the ability to cut and score and shoot off the ball, but just his general package that he brings is not really on this team. And I'm just really, really excited, like you are, to see him in the green and white this year. I think sky's the limit for him. It's just the amount of how fast he can develop. And again, that kind of rounds back into once he gets a little bit more physically developed and he finishes a little stronger at the rim. That's probably my one maybe bone to pick right now with his game. He is going to be an absolute two-way terror in the Big Ten. And I think his impact will be a little bit immediate if the roster stands pat as it is. Moving to Pierre Brooks. I am a big fan of Pierre, 6'6", 218 pounds. He has kind of that small forward, power forward frame. He was the primary guy in his high school team. Didn't have the best competition this year, but I think what you saw him do is go out and dominate when he played. I'll have to pull up his stats real quick here, but he ended up averaging 33.1 points per game, 10.7 rebounds per game, 4.7 assists, 2.3 steals per game, 1.4 blocks. I mean, he basically did everything for his team. It was almost the reverse situation of Akins, where Akins probably could have had that type of season, maybe competed for Mr. Basketball had he stayed at Farmington. Instead, he went out. I think he played a little bit better competition, and it was better for him to be in a structured environment where he kind of got the college feel, because when you go to a preparatory academy, that's kind of what you're getting. Brooks didn't play quite as good a competition, but he did what he was supposed to do. He went out and dominated it. So what do you think about his game? Where do you kind of see his role year one? And what are you feeling generally about just what his possible impact can be now and in the future for the Spartans?
I love his game. I love his mindset. I know if y'all didn't see this last summer, David got to interview him. We have that on Spartan Hoops. And I think in his answers there is just completely just showed me he's in it and he's got the heart to be a Spartan. I mean, we said he's an OKG and kind of lives that both on and off the court. You had mentioned kind of his frame and the way that he dominates on a team where he had to be that guy. And he's got different types of switches, or I think modes that he can kind of switch to. Because I had a friend who went to see him before states and said he had 40-something points, but it was one of the quietest 40-something points I've ever seen. And it's like he can pretty much be that type of player that kind of fits into kind of what you need at any given point. I like, too, that his huge focus in the offseason now is going to be defensively. I think he's aware of where he needs to be developing. He's aware of maybe some of, for lack of better words, deficiencies in terms of his game, and he's really kind of pushing to that. Not much to say in addition to what you said. I think he's just going to be probably the most OKG player of this recruiting class, is probably going to have the best Spartan career of the three when all is said and done.
I like that. I think that he is going to be a guy that probably sticks around 4 years. I think that he has NBA upside. You probably worry a little bit about the lateral mobility. That's the one issue where you'd like to see it. I think that's something that he can work on. He kind of has a frame that's similar to me as Malik Hall, where he has a really strong lower half, and he just needs to continue to work on his core and his lateral mobility. And if he's able to do that and guard a little quicker players, then I think that he has a chance with his shot creation ability to not only be a really, really good college player, which I think he's going to be, but also to give himself a shot. I mean, we saw during the state finals run, regardless of the competition, he hits that, from the logo three from deep off the step back to end the first half. I mean, his shot creation ability is it's a unifying trait that's among all three of these guys coming in, but his is really good. And he doesn't do it with like a rock. He doesn't have that extremely tight handle. He uses his body leverage really well. They posted him up kind of at the extended elbow quite a bit. And what you saw is them feeding the post. He's a square up guy. He would get his body in with a little step back and then kind of create some space to get that shot off. I think that he could probably get the shot arc a little higher. It's a little bit slower of a release, so I think that maybe they try to quicken that a little bit. But I think what you really like about him is he has the potential to probably slide occasionally into the power forward spot. Like Malik Hall, he's a little undersized there, but because of his lower strength, I think he's going to be able to guard it. And then offensively, if he's capable of dragging some of the bigger defenders out, if he gets a smaller guy on him, he can go into the post. I just think he's a chess piece that Michigan State's going to be able to move around. He's probably, of the three, the guy that maybe has the most impediment to playing time. Malik Hall and Hauser kind of have that power forward spot locked up. It depends on kind of where that goes. I think for the most part, Howell is going to remain at the power forward spot. Maybe he plays a little bit on the wing, but Gabe Brown should play hopefully, close to 26 to 28 minutes, I would say. And so the backup kind of wing spot, which is right now not available elsewhere unless they go out and get somebody in the transfer portal, will probably primarily be filled by Brooks. And I agree with you that the defensive part of the ball is where he maybe needs to make the most strides. The league that he played in, particularly the public school league, it's a really kind of an up and down league. It's really about scoring. So I think that he has the physical tools. We saw in that state final game, again, that chase down block that he had, kind of a game-saving moment where the momentum was swinging a little bit and he chased down this guy, absolutely stuffs him at the rim. All the physical tools are there. It's just a matter of him being disciplined and putting it together. And if there's a program that's better at turning guys who have physical tools into great defenders, I think Michigan State is right up there. So I'm with you. I think he has a lot to offer this class. Maybe he's got a little bit more blockage to his immediate playing time, but he's a guy that I think as he grooms and develops really has a chance in his upper class years to be a guy with, all Big Ten honors type stuff and a leader. I like the intangibles that you talked about because I think he has a lot of it at that. Switching to Max Christie, I'll let you just speak first on him. What do you think generally about his game? Obviously the most highly touted recruit coming in this class. We saved him for last because, I think he's going to have a big role on this team. What are your feelings on Max Christie?
Max Christie's game, when I look at it, clean game, smooth.
Chef's kiss. Love it.
Chef's kiss. He is, you said it. He is going to be the recruit out of this three-man class that's going to have to be probably the most impactful right away. I know there's been a lot of talk before. I like it, though. I think you kind of look at him like we treated Gary Harris when he came in, a 2-year player, most likely. I think he comes in intangibles with a little more. I mean, he gets into a shot a little better. His range is right there where Gary's was. And his defense, I think if you're not on Max Christie's defense, make sure that you focus on that. I think that's going to be an impactful side of the ball that he can step in and produce right away. I think where he kind of needs to grow in this first year is probably his strength, maybe add a little bit to his body. But once he gets that down and once he gets a feel for the college game, I think he's going to be set for the pros after year 2. Much like how Gary Harris's track went, same for Max Christie. Circumstances and situations are kind of the same too. I mean, Gary had to come in, start right away, and I wouldn't be surprised if that's where Izzo puts Max Christie as well.
I agree with you. I see him obviously in the starting lineup. There's obviously been a little chatter about Watts possibly returning. We'll get into that in a moment because he quote tweeted you earlier today. And so we can touch on that briefly. But as the way the roster currently stands with the 11 players on it, 11 scholarship players, I am 100% in agreement. He needs to play, and he probably needs to play pretty close to 30 minutes per night because that wing spot that had, a little bit of a void of shot creation last year outside of Aaron Henry now has a ton of shot creation void. Gabe Brown has always been more of a straight line driver, a set shooter. I think that he worked on that, and we'll definitely touch on that in the offseason, kind of where he advanced some of his ball handling skills. But I think for the most part, he's always going to be a guy that's more comfortable up the catch and shoot, and also just kind of in that corner where he pump fakes and then drives the baseline and hopefully dunks it. So he's not a guy that I think is going to be, facilitating for the rest of the roster. So outside of the point guard spot, who are you going to turn to for maybe some secondary creation? And I think Max Christie is going to be that guy. He's capable of basically being in range from deep the moment that he steps over the floor. He's got really, really long range. I just generally love the way that he moves. He handles the ball. He's extremely good at scoring in the mid-range. And he just gets to his spot. He's got a little rock to him. He's 6'6". He took a big stride in the strength department over the last 2 years. He was like 165 pounds, I think, after his, I want to say maybe his junior year. And then he really sprung it this last season, up another 20 pounds into his senior year. And he currently stands at 195 pounds. I think the staff is going to probably try to add another 10 to 15 to his frame if it can take it. If they're able to get him to like 215, before the season starts, then maybe we're not going to see him quite as long. But I think that just the way that his body has developed, it's going to take a couple years for him to kind of grow into his man's body. And once he does, the sky is the limit. I don't want to overstate or overburden a freshman coming in, but it's really hard not to look at this roster and say, how many guys are going to be able to create for themselves and go get you a bucket? Max Christie is definitely one of those guys. Obviously the addition of Tyson Walker helps in that department. But again, Max Christie is going to have to bear a lot of the burden. If Michigan State is going to be back into Big Ten title contention, he's going to have to shoulder a lot of it. And I think that, if you listen to any interviews he's done, anything like that, extremely mature, extremely thoughtful. He's a guy that really is going to buy into the team idea. And I think he's a guy that once he gets comfortable is someone you're going to have to be able to kind of lean on to either be your primary or your secondary scorer if Michigan State's going to be any good. Do you feel that same way?
I do. I think that's a great point because if you tracked Max Christie at Rolling Meadows, who, by the way, top scorer for Rolling Meadows in the history of the school, and then also top scorer for Chicago Suburban League, which is basically a lot of the leagues right outside the city proper. That's Max Christie. He could have pulled a Pierre Brooks this year for Rolling Meadows and gone off for 30, 40 every game. But there were games where you could see his box score 18 points and you're like, oh, well, what is this 5-star doing? He's getting his teammates involved. I think he was really good at buying into what he needed to be or what type of player he needed to be game in and game out. Some nights he needed to go off. Other nights he needed to get teammates involved and kind of share that responsibility. I think that's huge going into MSU because that is kind of the mindset you have to have. How do you fill the gaps and how do you fill your role? I think he's going to be great with that.
I agree. And you touched briefly on the defense, and I'll touch just on that for a moment because I would say it's a little bit more of an unknown in terms of the physical tools, again, he has a plus wingspan. I think laterally his mobility is pretty good for a guy his size. But they played a 2-3 zone at Rolling Meadows for the most part. He actually was the de facto center on that. So he was kind of the middle of the zone, blocked a lot of shots, was the primary team rebounder. He ends up finishing the season with 24 points, 10 rebounds, 4 assists, 3 steals, 2 blocks. So a similar Brooks kind of stat line where he ends up stuffing the stat sheet. Again, the competition level maybe wasn't as high as what Jaden Akins saw this year, but Max Christie was nominated for McDonald's All-American. He ended up winning Chicago Sun-Times Player of the Year, so he joined players like Jalen Brunson, Jahlil Okafor, and Jabari Parker in that department. And he also was nominated as the Nike Hoops Summit Team, which is part of Team USA Basketball. So he won all the accolades. He spent a summer, I believe it was maybe in between his sophomore and junior year, where he went to Brazil, and he averaged 9.5 points per game, 3.3 rebounds per game for Team USA on the way to U16 FIBA America's gold medal championship. So he's had some of that international experience. He's played on the Under Armour circuit. He's a guy that I think is going to be able to step in right away and hopefully provide some help. And how good he can be on the defensive end remains to be seen. Again, maybe it's to some degree how he can add strength to his body. But I think that you have to be really excited about the way that it could shape up. If he's playing that 2 spot and he's next to Gabe Brown, and then you look down the line, then you have, 6'6" with a little longer wingspan, 6'7", 6'8" with a little longer wingspan. Either Malik Hall or Joey Hauser, depending on how that starting lineup shakes out. I would probably lean Hall myself. So 6'7", but a little bit thicker. And then, if all goes well and the gods do what they're supposed to, Marcus Bingham is starting, playing 20 minutes per game next season, and you have a 6'11" shot blocker. So just the amount of length that they'll end up having on the wings, I think will a certain degree make up for maybe some of Tyson Walker's slightness and his little smaller frame. So I think that just the combination of kind of how you're seeing the roster shape, with 52% of the shots leaving between Henry, Langford, and Watts going out the door. Max Christie is a huge beneficiary of that, and he's a guy that I think is going to have the ability to step in right away and contribute for the Spartans. I'm super excited to see it. So we touched on it briefly. We have 11 spots in the scholarship that are currently filled heading into it with all the current departures. So 2 spots left to potentially fill. We got to touch on it briefly before we get into the Rocket Watts situation. Emoni Bates. I have long probably been skeptical when he originally committed to Michigan State. I thought it was more of a 50-50 bet. I read the Athletic article by Brendan Quinn, and I got the impression that his father really wants to control, some of the narrative out there, some of the media image. I think we saw that again this last weekend with Jonathan Gavoni's tweets in regards to maybe some of the issues that Bates was running into just regarding some of his efficiency measurement and his ability to, put himself in tough shot positions. EJ Bates ended up coming out and kind of backlashing that comment and saying he didn't know anything about it. And then Travis Branham from 24/7 kind of wrote an article regarding maybe some of the strength issues he's running into, that he kind of matured a little bit quicker than some of his peers, strength-wise and game-wise, and now some of those guys are kind of catching up to him. I think that it's fair to say at this point that Emoni Bates is most certainly a top 5, maybe even top 2 guy in the 2022 class. But the original discussion in regards to a generational talent or the next LeBron James, what an overwhelming burden to put on a kid, particularly at that young of an age. But I think to a certain degree that needs to die down a little bit, because we've seen him. He goes head-to-head with Jalen Duren, who's the other guy that's top 22, built like just a brick house, gets Chris Webber comparisons. And so they ran into him. He's guarding him for most of the game. And you're seeing some difficulty with, his ability to use some of his strength to get by guys and his handle. So I think there needs to maybe just be a reset. Emoni Bates is going to be a very, very good prospect, whether he plays at Michigan State or not. But he's currently at the point where he needs some physical development and maybe some coaching, because he really hasn't gotten much of that, in my opinion. He's been trained, and he's to a certain degree really been protected by his dad, which I completely can understand. But I think we've gotten to a point now where it's time for, him to be able to get some real coaching and development training, particularly in the weight room. So the golden question is, does that happen at Michigan State, or does he take an opportunity maybe at overtime or the G League, one of those type things? Where do you kind of stand on this? What are you feeling generally about what will possibly happen with him?
I mean, let me just say first that in regards to EJ Bates, completely understandable in terms of, I think, how he wants to oversee his son's development, his career, and eventually getting into the league. And I think with that being said, this next chapter before playing professional ball or playing in the NBA, he's going to have to give up some of the reins in terms of finding the right program or fit or coach to really give Emoni those developmental pieces that he's going to need before he takes that next step. And I mean, I would assume that EJ is all for that. I think that aside, I'm not holding my breath for, I think, an update or a commitment either way. I am not great predicting just where people end up in the first place. And I think with Emoni Bates, I'm just, throwing things at a wall to see if it sticks. But here's what I will say. I think if he does come to Michigan State, if he commits to Izzo, if he comes here for at least a year, doesn't necessarily, I think, make Michigan State a national title contender, but I think it puts them in a better spot. But that's a situation where we're seeing it kind of unfold. Izzo and the program, they're putting a lot of eggs into this basket. And I think, you've mentioned this before, there are going to be a lot of things that just have to happen, and they have to happen the right way. There has to be buy-in on both sides. There has to be a commitment on both sides. And there has to be, what is this middle ground that we're meeting each other at? Izzo's not just going to throw away all of his things, all of kind of 25 plus years of coaching and philosophy to bring Emoni Bates in and kind of let him do what he wants to do. And I don't think EJ and Emoni are going to come in and expect that. I think this is definitely the stage where they're really going to be focusing on, okay, what does Emoni need to be developing to get to the NBA? I think that a couple of things need to align for Bates or Emoni Bates in his camp. I think one, that Brendan article was great, that it mentioned like the strength and conditioning and the physicality of where Emoni's at right now. Earlier in his high school career, very much towered over opposing players. I think athletically much better than everyone else on the court. And like you said, and like he said in the article, now people are catching up. So strength and conditioning at Michigan State, we know, especially with our basketball program, does wonders. That's going to have to be one of the biggest buy-ins there if he does come to MSU. Second thing is honestly defense, and I think hustle and effort on that side. In high school, it's not really the clearest window in terms of seeing a player's defensive potential or upside. It's just how it is these days. But I think with Bates, especially early on in the year, we just saw maybe for lack of better words, just a lack of effort or consistency, I think is where I would go with that. But I do think, and here's a huge upside, I think, for Bates coming to Michigan State. I think what we're seeing now is that he's getting double and triple team night in and night out. And I think for any high school player, that's just hard to combat. I think for Bates with, players that are now, gaining traction on him in terms of athletic ability, strength, and size, that's just near impossible to be consistent and efficient in that regard. With Michigan State's, the way that we run things, I think with our pick and roll, the way that we move the ball, I think that's going to open up and free him a little bit more. I think that is an opportunity for him to kind of jump in and I think at least get a little more breathing room. Defenses are going to have to be honest, especially if you're using Bates in the pick and roll and pick and pop. And that could be an opportunity where we can see him shine. But in terms of him going one way or the other, let me just say, anyone listening, don't hold your breath. Don't hold your breath. It might be a while.
I think that's fair. With everything coming out, I think what needs to happen first and foremost, like you're right, it's time for EJ Bates to give up some of the control in terms of the basketball development. I understand that you want to protect him from the media and from his image. And it's also to a certain degree now about maintaining his NBA draft stock because he was the bona fide first pick, for so long, since 7th or 8th grade, basically. He's the anointed one. And now he's run into a situation where is he the best player in his class? And that's a serious question between him and Jalen Duren. So I think to a certain degree, there needs to be another step in the development that has to happen from a perspective of you need to turn the keys over to give him a better opportunity to take that next step. And with all respect to the current coaching staff and the current trainers that he has, he needs to turn that over to somebody better. And so in terms of physical development and basketball skill development, he needs to take that step. Could it be done? And could there be benefits from coming to college? Absolutely. I think particularly on the defensive end, like you mentioned, there's some issues regarding maybe effort or consistency there. I think that obviously if he comes to play at Michigan State, you are going to learn how to play on that side of the ball. It's just basically ingrained in you. He's going to have, the ability to play against a lot of talented players. If he came into this class playing next to Max Christie, who can take some burden off you, playing next to some of the seniors and some of the upperclassmen, who's friends with Gabe Brown, it's the ability for him to grow as a basketball player is available at Michigan State. It's a matter of whether they think that that is the best route. And his dad will have to give up some control over, the media image, because Michigan State's always had a very open locker room. He's going to be asked questions. He's going to be put in situations. And how is he going to handle that? We just don't know yet, because he really hasn't been put in that spot. I think he's gotten to the point now where he's old enough, and that conversation is old enough where you have to start giving him some of the media, because how else is he going to learn how to handle some of the adversity that we've seen recently from him, unless he's asked the questions, unless he's, he has a tough night and he says, you know what, I didn't play the best to my ability, but I'm capable of doing better. I'm capable of growing as a player. And sometimes you have to answer those questions to grow, not only as a basketball player, but as a human being. So I think that he's getting close to that point where maybe that next step needs to happen. In terms of what would it mean for him to join the team, I'm with you. I don't think that makes him a national title contender right from the get-go. I think that he still has things that he needs to work on. Could they develop by the end of the year? Does he make them a better team? Absolutely. And will they probably rise up the recruiting rankings if he was to actually reclassify and join? Yes. But I think that as a fan base, given the way that his development has gone, I think we need to probably just temper expectations a little bit, because a lot of the talent coming in is new pieces. It's Tyson Walker, it's Max Christie, it's Jaden Akins, Pierre Brooks. So what this team will be is not going to be known that first or second month of the season. We might see flashes of it. It's going to be when we get into the meat and potatoes of the Big Ten Conference and we're 7-8 games in and we're grinding, we're finding out, what kind of grit this team has and what kind of talent it has. So it'll be very interesting to see. Like you, I am not going to hold my breath. I think that the professional route, the ability to make money and continue to develop, I think the G League Ignite team, the way that you've seen Jalen Green be able to develop and remain some of his stock, Kuminga, some of the other guys, I think that that's a realistic route, and I wouldn't be surprised if they kind of mess around to a certain degree with the age restrictions and whatever to be able to get him in. And if he does, I mean, if Jalen Green's getting paid $500,000 plus benefits, what does Emoni Bates do for that league? I think that there's a possible, 7-figure type offer between all the benefit package that maybe is just too good to pass up. He's able to continue to develop among other NBA players. He goes on the other side of the state in California where, to a certain degree, his dad has to let go of some of that control because he's so far away. And I think that his ability to grow, is possible during that route too. So I don't really think that there's a bad option for him. I think Michigan State could be beneficial. It just really remains to be seen what they think the best option is to maintain his, status, his NBA status, and to cash in, because eventually what you want to do, especially early on, is ensure that all the hard work that you've paid off for ends in endorsements, it ends in, a top 2 or 3 pick in the NBA draft, and you get paid for all the hard work. So I understand that, they're going to maybe make the decision that they feel is best for them. Let's touch on Rocket Watts. So you tweeted out, I believe it was earlier today, or was it yesterday, and he quote tweeted you today?
I think it was yesterday, yeah, and then the quote tweet happened today.
Yeah. So go ahead and read it. What exactly did you say for the tweet? Do you have that up?
Yeah,
I mean, it was something like, regardless of where Rocket Watts ends up, you hope that he balls out, and you clipped the Duke highlights, essentially just one of the best games that he had last year, including the Michigan game, obviously, but a game where he just absolutely balled out. He was lethal. He quote tweets you back that the decision is coming soon, and he tabs a blue heart. So it wasn't a green heart. So despite maybe some of the rumors that we've seen about him possibly returning to Michigan State, I guess we're reading too much into, the various social media, but typically when you send out that heart, there's the green heart means Michigan State. He goes with the blue heart. So you figure maybe the team that he chooses ends up being blue. Is it a Creighton? Is it a Xavier? Is it, one of the many programs that have potentially been linked to him? What do you think about that? Do you have a general feel if you think that means he's probably on his way out, or do you think it's just subterfuge and we don't really know one way or the other what he's going to do?
Yeah, I mean, I think that blue heart definitely pushed me more, but even before he quote tweeted it, I had just had a feeling, he was probably heading somewhere else, and that's honestly not coming from anything or anyone. It's just a gut feeling. And at the end of the day, and I've told you this before, is I think for Rocket Watts, he is someone coming into Michigan State during his 2 years here, and as he continues to play basketball. I want him to succeed. I think he's such a fun player to watch when he is on. I think he is such a fun player to watch when his head is all in there. And I know that this past year there's just a lot of challenges and ups and downs. We saw the best of times with that Duke game and with his performance against Michigan, and then we saw the challenges of adjusting to the point guard role and really having to play. With limited time because of COVID and whatnot. But I think at the end of the day, I just want him to succeed no matter where he goes. And I think it's one of those tough things where I think he's going to be successful finding a program where there's a little bit more of a free-flowing offense for him to operate in. And I think we tried to make that work at Michigan State. And I think it just limited him in terms of, what his game is and what he brings. I think, looking at maybe a Xavier or potentially like a Creighton or maybe even a Kentucky, I think with more of those open types of offenses, those drives and kicks, he could be more successful with, the toolkit that he has. But even before that quote tweet, I think he was headed somewhere else. What about you?
I do too. We heard, I think from some various sources, some message boards and some chatter that Michigan State would be willing to obviously take him back. I think that the only reason for him not transferring out would be he got himself into a situation where there was a blockage in maybe PT, or he didn't land at a program that he thought, was befitting of the type of player that he is, the high caliber player that he, has shown in flashes. And so to my, general feeling, I kind of was leaning that way, but then the chatter started rising. I said, if he comes back, what does that kind of mean for some of the freshmen? There's obviously some blockage of time. To me, Max Christie is a guy that should absolutely start regardless of Watts returning or not. So would Watts be willing and would the staff be able to, have him come off the bench? Because I think Max Christie is really going to be, the driving force in the offense next year at a certain point. So it gets a little bit complicated if he was to return. I'm with you. I think that probably he is on his way out. It's always felt that way, that maybe just a better fit for him. I know his dad was really never fond of Michigan State from the very get-go. And it's one of those situations that I talked about in the original podcast I did with Greg, that maybe it's a mutual beneficial parting of ways for both. And I obviously we're going to be a little bit sad that it didn't work out. But I wish him nothing but the best. And I really, like you, hope that he balls out somewhere. Wherever he goes, I hope that we see him, on top 10 Sports Center every once in a while, just absolutely like laying some team, to rest, basically. So we'll have to see, kind of monitor that. That obviously would be a big decision if he did come back. We'll probably do emergency pod in that type of circumstance. But if he leaves, I hope he finds a good home and he finds somebody that can really use him aesthetically, offensively, like you said, in a little more free-flowing offense. So if Watts doesn't return, Bates doesn't reclassify, 2 scholarship spots. I think what you like about what's on the roster with 11 guys is every single one of them can play. This isn't a situation where somebody checks in at the scorer's table and you're cringing about the situation that goes. I think if you're looking at kind of what Michigan State has coming in and what is leaving, like there is a ton of upside in the exchange there. I think Michigan State has had a really nice offseason. Some of the temptation for Tom Izzo in terms of some of the players that perhaps were not at quite a Big Ten caliber are being removed from the roster. And this is going to make way for the younger, more talented players to have an ability to step in and contribute immediately. So just touching on briefly, what do you think they do with the 2 spots? There has been some talk that maybe they're looking at a wing in the portal. There's been no names out there. I think I'm going to end up doing maybe a podcast with Carter Elliott, who's pretty good about just having a general pulse of what's out there and getting an idea of what potentially Michigan State could land. But what would you say Michigan State would want to add into this group? What are you looking for if they were to, or if they don't, are they just going to hold on to those 2 scholarships and kind of see what happens from the season? And would you be okay with that?
I mean, I'd be more than okay with that. I think the great thing about this offseason is that the options that Michigan State has in terms of the moves that they make, it's like a win-win situation. I believe Ant tweeted this maybe a week or 2 ago, but he said Tom Izzo's had a really, really good offseason. Maybe that was all serious. Maybe there's some jokes in there, but I agree. I think he's kind of left this program or left himself open to taking either route, and I think being fine. If he does decide to go for, another transfer here, I'm with you that I would ideally look at a wing, especially if we're not getting an Emoni Bates reclassification and commitment. We are thin there, and I think having one more person kind of come in and help maybe lessen that gap or hole is going to be setting us up well for not just next year, but I think also moving forward the next couple of years. The one thing I do want to avoid, though, is getting a transfer that could impede or impact, I think some of the time for our players that are already coming in. And like, ideally, I don't want to be going for a player who's going to be starting right away at the wing. I would want to look for, I think, an efficient, probably experienced wing coming off the bench. And again, I mentioned this before, but the thing that Juwan Howard did real well last offseason was the players that he brought in. I mean, he brought in Mike Smith, starting point guard, and then Sean D. Brown coming in off the bench, kind of like pushing Izzo, like, if you want to get one more transfer, go that route, because I think that's kind of the option that we have. If Bates does happen to reclassify and then commit, I think then maybe turn your attention potentially to, if you're going to go to the portal, a big. But I think if that happens, maybe then your push to get a transfer probably lessens. Holding the 2 scholarships, I think, is fine too. Like you said, there isn't going to be a player next year that goes to the scores table that we're going to be cringing and saying, "Ooh, I don't know about this." I think it's going to be a lot more cleaner, and the benefit of that is your young guys are getting fast track for a lot more minutes. It's kind of a win-win either way. Yeah.
I'm with you on that. I think that if you take one, you probably take a 6'5", 6'6" guy that plays some defense, that can shoot the 3, that's okay with playing maybe 20 minutes per game. So where does that kind of leave you? Probably either a mid-major transfer up, the ability to maybe play for a little bit better program, but play a role, or a power conference guy that played on a crappy team. And I think the Chaundi Brown example is a perfect one, because he came in, he played a role, multi-versatile position guy, knew what he had to do, played hard, wanted to buy into that role. I just think that there's so many limited guys that are willing to do that. And so to be able to identify and find one to add it and not upset the balance of the really talented freshmen that you have coming in is going to be a little bit, kind of, do you add one or do you not? Does the fit work? Does it not? I think that I'm okay if they stood pat, because I think that there's some versatility with a guy like Akins who can play the 1 or the 2. I think Walker can, to a certain degree, play off the ball. I know he's a little bit smaller, but because of his shooting ability, they did do that at Northeastern a little bit. So if Hogarth's in the game, maybe Walker could, in spots, play a little bit of the 2. So I think that guard position is going to be okay. It's just the one thing that you would worry about is if a guy like either Gabe Brown or Max Christie gets banged up at some point in the season, then that wing size depth gets a little bit thin. And guys like Pierre Brooks would have to step in. Maybe, some Malik Hall would have to slide into the small forward spot potentially. So you're playing guys a little bit out of probably their comfort zone if that happens. But again, then you're giving the ability to some of the freshmen to earn some of those minutes. And, it's one of those things where they're really not going to know what they have until everyone gets on campus. So it's tough. It looks like July 1st is the transfer portal deadline. I think that guys maybe get up sometime around like June, mid-June, I believe. The school season ends, and then they kind of get on campus around that time. So maybe they get one, maybe they don't. But I guess it remains to be seen if they entered into next season with only 11 guys on the scholarship. I personally would be okay because I like every single one of them. That kind of takes us to the class of 22. And, you touched on it briefly. If we're going to address the wing depth, the other route that you could take is maybe a guy that was a little bit more touted but didn't get quite the run. A guy like maybe Bryce Thompson from Kansas, who Michigan State recruited. He was banged up this year. He didn't play much for Kansas. I'm sure that he's expecting to find a starting role and go somewhere. But would you consider taking a guy and saying, listen, you can compete for the minutes that are available on the wing. We can't guarantee much more than, 15 minutes per game next season, but we're going to lose a senior in Gabe Brown. And so it makes sense for you to enter the fold, be part of the program, and then allow him to kind of step in potentially to that role next year when Gabe Brown possibly departs. There's considerations I think that you can do. Let's start from the top in regards to position-wise. The only point guard that they have offered in this 2022 class is Trejuan Holloman. He's from Minnesota, 6 feet, long-armed, great floor general and defender. I think in any other circumstance outside of what's on this roster, he'd be a guy I would love to have. But there's 3 point guards on the roster right now. You have Jaden Akins coming in. AJ Hoggard is going to be here for 3, maybe 4 years. Tyson Walker has the potential to play 3 more years. It just feels like a position that's pretty loaded. I don't think that he has the size or the shooting capabilities right now to play off the ball. So do you really take a guy like that? To me, it seems like, despite the fact that he's mentioned Michigan State is still recruiting him, I'm kind of a little bit iffy if they really are pushing in on a guy given the way that their rotation is structured currently. And they just offered Braelon Green, as we mentioned in the beginning of this, a combo guy in 23. So I think it probably makes sense to wait a year for another point guard, combo guard type. What's your feelings on that in terms of the 22 class?
Yeah, I agree. It's so unfortunate that he falls in the year that he's at because, as you taught me, with recruiting, especially point guards, you kind of want to scaffold out the years in which you recruit those point guards, right? And we've already got Jaden Akins coming in. We've got AJ Hoggard ready to start his sophomore year, Tyson Walker, and then we're offering Green in 2023. To me, it just would not make the most sense to kind of prioritize Holloman. We've last couple of years had a log jam at our 4s and 5s with our bigs. Like, do we really want to do that again with our guards? I don't think so. I really don't think so. But I mean, like you had mentioned, he is a recruit that wherever he goes, he's going to be an instant impact. I love both sides of the ball with his game. I mean, defensively, he is just a motor. He is in your face. He pressures high and hard. And then there are so many clips out there where he's recovering or getting backside blocks, and you're just like, wow, your motor's huge. And then offensively, it's kind of like a interesting kind of dynamic here. He's calm, collected. He's got vision, goes straight to the hoop, can find people with his playmaking. He's just got a lot of intangibles that you really want to see in a point guard. Yeah. So he's a little undersized, but I mean, wherever he goes, he's going to be great. I don't see him being a priority for Michigan State with the year he falls under.
That's kind of my feelings exactly. A guy that I would love to have in the program had we not just basically stockpiled it. If they didn't go out and get Tyson Walker, and you're kind of looking at AJ Hoggard and Jaden Akins to carry that, because of Akins' ability to maybe slide over, that's a consideration. But I think given the way that the roster stands now, it just doesn't make sense. Next position, shooting guard. Again, they've really only offered a single guy, Jaden Schutt. He's ranked 153rd overall. We discussed this. I think that's a little bit of an under ranking currently. He's definitely a top 100 guy to me. The level of competition that he's faced is probably some impediment to him rising up the boards. I really look at him as kind of like a Matt McQuaid type with a little bit more pop around the rim. McQuaid was ranked 71st out of high school, so I think that probably, a rough estimate of where Schutt should land this year is maybe somewhere in the 80s, a top 80 type kid. He finishes pretty well around the rim, can finish with 2 hands. Nice three-point shooting. He's a guy that now holds the Illinois high school record for most threes made in a game with 17. We did an interview with him at SpartanHoops.com. You should check that out. I believe that's in front of the paywall, so you can get that for free. He has 4 brothers. All of them played basketball. His dad coached. He's just a really nice kid. He's a good program fit. The one program I was really worried about him potentially sliding to was Illinois. They have absolutely stocked up on 2 and 3s the last couple classes, both 21 and heading into 22. I think they have like a total of 5 guys that they've added to that wing core. They grabbed Alfonso Plummer, who's kind of that off guard, I believe, from Utah in the portal. Podzimski, I'm sure I butchered that. And then they grabbed, I think, Bass as well as AJ Storr, a guy that Michigan State had some interest in as well, who's kind of risen up recently, recruiting boards. So I think that they're pretty set at the wing, particularly. I don't think that they're obviously going to get Adam Miller back, in my opinion, but they seem to kind of have that position filled out for the next couple of years. I don't think it makes sense for him to go to a spot where maybe he would be blocked in minutes, whereas you look at Michigan State with Gabe Brown, again, probably out the door, Max Christie not going to be there for much longer than 2 years. There's an ability to play almost immediately, and he would be an extremely welcome addition, in my opinion. What do you think about him? Where do you see him kind of fitting in, and do you think the Spartans have a shot at him?
I think we have a better shot now that Illinois is just absolutely loaded on the wings. I mean, all of those moves they're making and not seeing one of those moves involve Jaden Schutt's just great for us. Because I think you're right. Illinois was the other program that you would kind of pinpoint as the potential to kind of snag Schutt away from East Lansing. I would put him as a priority pick, and we're going to talk about this later after we discuss the rest of the positions, but he is someone who, after, we talked to him last summer, this entire year, just kind of been all in on. For anyone who's been missing Matt McQuaid and kind of the intangibles he brought to Michigan State, look no further than Jaden Schutt coming in. Incredible 3-point shooter in range. You're right. I think he's got a little more pep and a little more bounce when he's close to the rim. The way that McQuaid was able to finish his junior and senior year around the rim, I mean, I'm thinking that Duke game, that's something that Jaden Schutt's capable of doing too. Not to mention, and you let me know if I'm wrong, does have connections with Max Christie through AAU ball. So that's
Illinois Wolves is the program, and he played, I think maybe practice one season, whatever. He was obviously an age gap difference, but he did play for the same program.
Yeah, and that's another thing too that I think it's just kind of a quick fit for him, and I think you're right with Max Christie probably going out after year 2, some spots opening, has the opportunity to be getting some minutes early. Kind of like Matt McQuaid did too. I mean, Izzo put him in some real critical times and spots his freshman year. I wouldn't be surprised if, Izzo would be doing that with Schutt as well. I think Schutt's capable.
I agree. So his offer sheet as it currently stands, kind of the top of it, Iowa, Wisconsin, Xavier, Creighton, Nebraska, and Ohio State. I think given the fact that Michigan State's not really pressing in on too many other guards, they've prioritized him from the beginning. My understanding is he is going to try to schedule a visit this summer to Michigan State. As soon as we find out those details, we will let everybody know. But I think that they have a real good shot to say, here's the prototype of what, we've had before. A Bryn Forbes, a Matt McQuaid type, where you're going to be coming off screens, where you're going to be able to shoot. He played point guard the last couple of years in high school. This last year in particular, I think, because his point guard graduated. So he has a little bit of ball handling ability. His brothers are all 6'7", 6'8". Like, they grew a little bit into college. So he's a guy that's currently stands at 6'5", but has the potential to possibly grow another inch or two. And then he goes from what could be a really nice college career to a guy that maybe potentially could play with his shooting ability in the NBA the way that it is. So it'll have to remain to be seen kind of his development arc physically as well as athletically. But I think that he would be a great addition to the team, a guy that I really, really like. And I'm glad that they are kind of pressing pretty hard at him. Moving to small forward, this is a little bit of odd position that we discussed. They're really not in on a clear wing. I think that if you want to discuss maybe Isaac Traudt and Ty Rodgers as a wing type, to me, they're more of type of like hybrid forwards where their best position, at least defensively, will probably end up being in the power forward spot. Ty Rodgers maybe can defend the 3, but I think he doesn't quite have the handle and the facilitation ability to play the small forward spot offensively. And Trout's kind of the reverse situation where Offensively, he will be playing on the wing. I think he's a guy that can do that. But defensively, again, probably a little bit more comfortable guarding the power forward. With Malik Hall in the fold on the roster, if you were able to put those two guys next to each other, they could almost flip-flop where Traudt could play the three, early on in his tenure at Michigan State, while Malik Hall guards the small forward spot, and they can kind of switch in that regard. So that would be an interesting dynamic. But generally speaking, Michigan State's not in on a wing. I think that they need to probably get one or two guys, in my opinion, on the wing. If you're potentially going to have 5 open scholarships with Gabe Brown, Joey Hauser is technically eligible. He can probably get both a red shirt, and then he has the extra year from last year. So, it's a possibility he could play another couple years with Michigan State. But technically speaking, he is going to be a senior next year as well. And then obviously Marcus Bingham, I think, will probably spend his last year with Michigan State next year. So you're going to have a total of potentially 5 spots if you don't end up filling that. The bigs, which we'll get to in a minute, are clearly have to be filled. But I think that you probably need to add at least one guy from every position, 2 to 4, and they don't really have their sights set on a wing. So that might have to be added in the transfer portal, either a guy that can play a couple years from this year or somebody next year that they like. Is that kind of your feeling, that maybe that's how they'll address that?
Yeah, I would agree. If not hitting the transfer portal this year for a wing, then looking at next year. I just think it's going to be too thin with our departures after, what would it be, 2022? Yeah. I think it's just going to be too massive a hole to just to completely ignore. And so if you're not going to actively recruit high school, then look for that in the portal.
Yes. And I think that's the one spot where you can find a guy that's 6'5", 6'6". There was a decent amount that came into the portal this year, potentially still the ability to add one. But I think it's a position that maybe you can find a little bit more easily than, say, a high-quality point guard or, high-quality just big man in general. So power forward spot, this one, again, we touched briefly, Ty Rogers. Michigan State connections, I think it's a cousin to Jason Richardson. That didn't work out so well for the Brian Bowen time, and I don't think it's going to work out very well for Michigan State this one either, unfortunately. It's a situation where, despite the fact that they've offered him, it doesn't seem like they're recruiting him that hard. Most of the articles that I've seen have mentioned other teams. I think Michigan is in that mix. But he's a guy that it wouldn't surprise me if he went out of state. There's some other programs involved in him. I believe FSU, Louisville, some of the others. So I don't really have my hopes really set that high on him. I don't think it's the guy that I really, really, really like. And I'm not sure what's going to happen with him, because I think that he is going to be maybe the hottest recruited guy outside of maybe Jalen Washington in this group, is Isaac Traudt. And Isaac Traudt recently scheduled an official visit June 17th to 19th. He got an offer just a couple weeks ago from Michigan State. We got a chance to interview him. If you haven't read it, check it out, SpartanHoops.com. Really nice kid, humble, hardworking. Only 6'1" as a freshman, had a massive growth spurt and shot up to about 6'7" his sophomore year. He currently stands at 6'9". The amount of strength that he has put on his body is absolutely unbelievable. I think he's added like 30 pounds, maybe 35 pounds since freshman year. He's really filled out. He's a guy that dropped 51 points in a game last season. He can shoot the three. He's getting better at shooting it off the dribble. He actually was the de facto point guard from his team, which didn't have a ton around him. He was seeing double teams all year and still shot, I believe, 37% from deep in the upper 50s from the field. I like everything about his game. He reminds me a little bit of Joe Wieskamp, but he's in a bigger package. Wieskamp was only 6'6". He's 6'9". I don't know if he'll be quite the high-level shooter, because that is a lot to ask. But again, we just don't know, because he's not taking catch-and-shoot threes. He's a guy that's seen so much attention that most of his shots are coming off the dribble, so it's hard to know what he could be. But slasher, ball handler at 6'9", athletic around the rim. I think there's just a ton to like from him. What do you think about his game? What do you feel about the chances? Obviously, like the official. What are your thoughts, Dan?
Yeah, I mean, you said it all. I'm all in on him. His growth and just the way he's been able to continually develop his game from freshman year, even freshman year to sophomore year. I mean, he's taken momentous strides. That growth spurt, I did not realize that happened all like in a year span. Why can't that happen to me? But still, I mean, you mentioned it. when he is going for a slash drive on the baseline, when he is taking efficient shots from deep and making them, not only is he being double teamed, only is he seeing constant pressure every night, but I mean he's stepping into it with confidence. I think he is incredibly well of picking and choosing how and when to attack. You'll see a lot of his tape when he does drive to the hoop. There are situations where he plays through the contact and he gets an and one, he finishes strong. And then there are plays and sequences where he, figures I need to be a little crafty here and get that basket. He is a really versatile player. I mean, you kind of brought me into him and now I'm completely bought in. I would definitely prioritize him, especially as we were just talking about needing to fill this wing spot. I think he can do it. And mentioning the Malik Hall kind of switch with, I think having Traudt, more so guard the 4 and having Malik Hall guard the wing. It's like a match made in heaven right there. I think that would work.
I agree. So my understanding from the pitch that the program's made and what he said in the interview is that they envision him kind of in the Joey Hauser role. And we saw them kind of move him all over. I know it wasn't exactly a completely successful season, probably by Joey Hauser standards. I think he's going to be the beneficiary of having a point guard this year, which, he really lacked. But the way that they moved him, they played him on the block, they moved him up to the elbow, they let him pick and pop. I think that's exactly how you're going to use it. He's a guy that's more athletic. He's a guy that's a better ball handler. I think that the aspects of what you kind of could possibly see Joey Hauser's ceiling, Isaac Traudt could fill that out in a big way, and he would be an absolutely massive land. He recently got an offer from UNC. He's taken an official visit to UNC as well as Virginia. Creighton, Nebraska, he's a Nebraska kid, are both very much in the mix. Creighton was in on him early. He has some hometown love. And then the other school you have to watch out for is Oklahoma. He grew up, his grandpa was a Sooners football fan. When he was speaking in his interview, all the players that he talked about being his favorite players, Trae Young, Kyler Murray, all the rest of it were all Oklahoma guys. I think there's just a soft spot in his heart for Oklahoma. Does he eventually go there? I don't know. In terms of basketball fit, obviously Michigan State is a more pronounced program. Porter Moser going from Chicago Loyola to getting that job, he's obviously hoping to, really turn that corner for them. But I think it's going to be tough just where they're at to be able to kind of raise up in the ranks in that conference. Whereas Michigan State, if he comes, has the pitch to say we've been predominantly at the top of the conference. If you come, we can remain there. And I think what they, above all, when he makes his decision, my feeling from it was really just the feel of the staff and the players on the roster. He wants to go to a place that's home. Michigan State has always had that quality. I think at the end of the day, the comfort level with the coaching staff will be a huge deciding factor. They have a chance to kind of swing that in their favor when he comes up in June. So I hope he enjoys his time. I hope he gets a nice weather weekend. I hope the sun's out. It's perfect. All the good-looking girls in East Lansing are walking around. That would be ideal for his long weekend coming up in June here. So moving to the bigs, and I'll classify them as bigs because it's a little bit of a fluid situation whether either of these two guys can possibly play the power forward spot. I lean towards their best position in college being at the center. The two guys that I'm speaking of are Jalen Washington and Tarris Reed. There also was recently some news on Twitter, Kijani Wright, who's a California kid. I thought that recruitment had long died. Put Michigan State in the top 7. I spoke to someone within the program. They said that he reached out to ask Michigan State to re-recruit them. He's the highest touted of the 3 guys. He's, I believe, a top 11 guy, a 5-star, can shoot the 3, can bang in the post, really kind of that versatile mold of the big that's coming into the NBA. And a guy that I thought has been a long time off their radar. Maybe we need to put him back on it, and I got to dig in a little bit more. I'm still pretty skeptical. I think he dropped his top 7, and almost all of them were West Coast schools. I can't remember off the top of my head there, but I thought it was predominantly West Coast. So, again, I'm not going to hold my breath on him. I think we should probably focus on the 2 guys who they're really after, and that is Tarris Reed Jr. and Jalen Washington. Let's start with Tarris Reed Jr. He's personally one of my favorite guys in this class. Michigan actually just offered him today. He's been offered by Purdue in Kansas recently, so his recruitment is starting to blow up. What do you think about his game? What do you think about his potential fit for Michigan State? How do you like him?
Yeah, I mean, much like Traudt, I am kind of pushing all my chips in with Reed. And also like Traudt, I mean, he's been picking up offers, and that's one thing you got to really look at, especially for recruits that Michigan State tends to look at early and maybe offer before some of these other, programs. Now these offers are coming in. And so if that doesn't tell you the type of player that Reed is and, the type of impact that coaches and programs think he's going to make for them, then look into that, because it's going to be, I think it's going to be substantial. I mean, he not only has gotten bigger and not only has gotten stronger. I mean, we mentioned it, 7'3" wingspan, has a beautiful kind of face-up mid-range game, beautiful shot that's continuing to develop and already looks great. Strong around the rim. I think that defensively can hold more of his own. But I think that's what I really look for with Reed. I think of our bigs, I like kind of the combination of, his outside game along with some of the explosiveness that he brings inside. We're going to talk about it later, so I'm not going to jump into it, but
okay.
Yeah, kind of bought in with him right now.
I am too. And I think that, when you look at this class in general for bigs, there's not a ton of great guys. And I think that Michigan State is in on, 2 and I guess potentially 3 of some of the best guys in this class in that position. Tarris Reed is a guy that I think culturally would be an absolutely fantastic fit. We did an interview again with him, SpartanHoops.com. I think that's also in front of the paywall from last summer. He specifically said that he wants a strict coach, that he wants to be uncomfortably coached and pushed and grown that way. Well, there's no better place than East Lansing for that. My understanding is he hopefully is going to take a visit. I would expect it to be an official sometime this summer. I know that he's excited about the offer for Michigan State and the potential landing spot. They're trying to juggle a couple different bigs, and they need to be cautious here because they didn't cast a very wide net. I mean, we're discussing this now. We potentially have somewhere between 3 to 5 spots to fill heading into next season. Well, we only really discussed, 5, 6 guys. So they haven't cast a very wide net. Obviously, the transfer portal changes that a little bit. You can go out and make your team better through that. But I think that Michigan State's always done a really good job of grabbing talent and developing itself, the bigs especially. I think if you look at kind of what this roster has missed the last couple of years, it's been a guy that can go get you an easy 2. And just think if you had a Nick Ward type last year, the type of pressure that it would have relieved from the offense and not really having that point guard spot. I like versatile bigs. I'm still extremely high on the big rotation that they have in Bingham, Marble, and especially Sissoko. But I think to a certain degree, getting a guy that's a little bit more back to the basket, mixing him into this group with what would potentially be Marble's senior year, a Sissoko junior year, and then you have a guy that's kind of developing as a low post option the freshman year. He's a guy that I'm really, really, really high on. I wish that, Michigan State would have pushed in a little earlier. I think that the thought was they don't want to scare off maybe the bigger fish, at least on paper, in Jalen Washington by, pushing all in onto Reed. I really think that they could take both of them technically, because if Washington ends up hitting his ceiling, we'll touch on him in a minute, he potentially is only going to be a guy that's there for a couple years. But I think that Michigan State needs to be cautious here, because if you let Reed slip through your fingers and you miss on Washington, you had an opportunity, I think, to really press all in on a guy that seems pretty adamant about the program. And I just hope that there's not any regrets in this. They need to land one of these 2 guys. I would be really happy with either, but Reed to me is just a perfect fit. Touching on Jalen Washington. Ranked a 5-star. He's the 20th overall now in that class. Came off a ACL tear his sophomore year. He missed basically the entire season, all off season. He's been a little bit slow to recover from that. He just started playing again this junior year. He's now on the AAU circuit. I wouldn't say he's quite back in terms of his vertical and lateral athleticism, but what you've seen from him is the ability to step outside and splash the 3. The staff has basically made the pitch to him that he's Jaren Jackson 2.0. They think that he's a guy that can step out, that has extreme length and can protect the rim on his ability alone as a shot blocker. And he's a guy that needs to continue to develop some strength to recover from that knee injury. But again, we've seen a recent surge of some of his recruiting. I believe OSU just recently offered Purdue, Louisville, Alabama, Illinois, Indiana. It wouldn't surprise me if Michigan eventually offers him as well. He's a guy that's going to be highly coveted in the Midwest and maybe even extended out to a little bit further. And so Michigan State feels very good about their chances. Dane Fife was the primary recruiter, but my understanding is Doug Wojcik has stepped back in and is taking the reins in that department. I think that it's a potentially good fit. They've been in on him for a very long time. They've been really liking him. Woodson scares me a little bit. I mean, we'll touch on it just slightly because he's done a really nice job. He convinced TJD to come back. If he shows the development, then you're fighting for a hometown kid. And again, you just have to be careful when you're balancing these two guys that you don't let one slip through the fingers for the other. I think at a certain point, there has to be a decision made where you need to make a decision. It's either us or somebody else. And if they can't give you that commitment, then you need to press all in on the other kid. So that's the one spot I'm really fascinated to watch. What do you think about Jalen Washington? What would be your preference, I guess, in terms between the two? And do you think that they could possibly take both?
Think possibly can take both. I mean, I don't think the Michigan State staff is off base when they're telling him that he could be Jalen Washington 2.0, or sorry, that he could be Jaren Jackson 2.0. Because I think from what we have seen, at least so far, that his game highly resembles it. I mean, a superb, just excellent outside shot and gets it off easily with his length and his size. And I think where you see Jaren Jackson, on the Memphis Grizzlies doing a little bit more now with that kind of dribble drive, maybe like mid-range, close to the basket floater, something that I think Jalen Washington's capable of doing too. I think it's just a matter of time in terms of, getting back to 100%. Defensively as well, I mean, can be a rim protector and has the size and length to do that and has the abilities. I think the one thing you mentioned that, we just have to keep an eye on is how is this recovery to 100% from an ACL tear going to look? I think the biggest impact that injury has had on him so far is just his explosiveness around the rim. I think he'd rather be a little more kind of like I think crafty, maybe being a little, for lack of better words, maybe a little more, deft around the rim instead of kind of going up for a huge slam. But I think if you're looking at Reed, maybe that's someone who can do that for you where Washington kind of give you other scoring opportunities. I am fortunate, or I guess we should be fortunate that Michigan State has been in on Jalen Washington for a while, which is, again, a big reason why we weren't in on Reed Jr. earlier. But in terms of big programs, we were one of the first names in there to give him an offer, especially it came before he even was playing again from that injury. So hopefully that does help in terms of our recruiting. Ideally, wouldn't mind getting both, but I think there are just a couple more question marks with Washington, especially around this injury, where right now I would lean Reed if we were only to pick one out of the two.
Yeah, I think that if you look at it from an upside perspective, Jalen Washington has more NBA upside here now. And if he can get his knee back healthy and regain some of that explosiveness that he showed a little earlier on in his career, he's a guy that when you mix in with potentially what they have coming in from 21, if they all stay another year, and then you add, a 6'9", 6'10" sniper from deep who can protect the rim in addition to what you have on the roster, I think that there's a lot to be excited about in that department. But again, Reed is a guy that I think will stick around for 3 to 4 years. He developed a little bit more explosiveness around the rim from his sophomore year to his junior year. I think we continue to see it. You're seeing the offers kind of roll in. He's kind of hitting some of his stride as well. So it's, one hand, I would take either one of them. I don't think there's really a wrong answer. I just want to make sure that the staff somehow lands one of them. Don't sacrifice one because of the other. If you get to a spot where one guy says they're willing to commit, to me, you take that guy. You don't worry about hurting the other guy's feelings. If you lose one because you take the other, at least you've landed one. And if you need to go out and get a big again in the transfer market, then maybe you address it in a different situation potentially down the way. So we're here about 1 hour, 13 minutes. We're almost wrapped up. For those still hanging in there, we super appreciate it. Let's just finish with this. What is your idealistic, realistic class for 22? And if you were only allotted one single player to commit tomorrow to Michigan State's 22 class, who is that for you?
Ideal realistic class I wrote down Reed Jr., Traudt, Schutt, and then I just put wing. I put wing because I think look at the portal for that. Just don't know the names a year from now. And then if I were to prioritize a player committing tomorrow, it'd be Reed Jr., specifically for the reason that he's getting a lot of offers coming in now. I mean, it's kind of just building and rolling. But also, I think by the time that he's going to be coming into East Lansing, we need a big that can fill what we're losing. But also, like you said, a guy who can get us an easy 2 points like Nick Ward did. And that is him to a T right there. So Reed Jr., Traudt, Schutt, wing. What about you?
I like that. I think that is a reasonable request. Again, I think we have a good shot with Schutt. So for me, I think that they have a really good ability to add him. Isaac Traudt is going to be recruited heavily. So that one's a little bit more of a question mark. We'll have to see how he feels after the visit, but I think that they're in a really good spot with him. And then you got to get one of the bigs. And like you said, probably add a wing from the portal. That's kind of how I would see this rounding out. If you ask me if I could have one single player from this class, I'm going to differ from you. I do absolutely love Reed. I've been in on him pretty early and often, but if you could give me one guy from this class, for me, I think it would be Isaac Traudt because he can play either the 3 or the 4. He gives you such versatility. If you look at kind of what they have bringing back from next year potentially, he's a guy that could almost slot in perfectly, like we said, next to Malik Hall, play on the wing. And then, we're talking about size in the wing and you go, 6'6", 6'9", 6'7", and potentially maybe Matty Sissoko's there and you have another 6'9", like there's just so much athleticism that you could add into the mix there. I think he could possibly be a plug-and-play guy from day one. So Isaac Traudt would be my pick from that, but I don't think the Tarris Reed's a bad pick at all. So for everybody at home who stuck through the whole episode, thank you again so much for supporting the brand. www.spartanhoops.com. I'm your host, David Klein. From my co-host, Dan and I, thank you so much for following along. And hope you subscribe to the website.